Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for another edition of the YUNOREVIEW, where I go over a bunch of records that I haven't reviewed formally, and I talk about them in a gauntlet, like in this video, one after the other. That's what we do. That's the YUNOREVIEW. So now that it's explained, let's go ba-bam! I will admit, despite not being a fan of tennis, not really enjoying Tennis's music, this new record is easily Tennis's best record, maybe most enjoyable record to me. Having said that, I think even at this point, with Tennis's best album, the songs are still pretty derivative, and really just make for very standard indie pop with some slightly refined instrumentation. It's fine, it's not terrible, it's not quite as insipid as I've found their old stuff to be, but still not something I would go out of my way to voluntarily listen to. I think there are other artists in a similar vein that I much prefer, so I don't know. The new Halsey album, believe it or not, is the best Halsey album by at least a few miles, her most versatile LP too, as there are some trap and pop-infused ballads and tunes on here. There are some more alternative and rock-based tracks that are more acoustic. We have interludes and appearances from Dominic Fike and Suga of BTS and Alanis Morissette. I think Halsey does a really good job of putting her influences and putting everything that musically makes her tick on display with this record. There are some songs, actually quite a few songs, that I think are duds, and while it is a pretty versatile album, it's still not a very risky album. It's great that artists in the mainstream pop sphere are being given the ability to create and explore so freely. This is the kind of pop record that I think 10 to 15 years ago, you just wouldn't have gotten this kind of album. So that is encouraging, and I do like that. But I think there need to be better tunes, and there needs to be more of an attempt to define what exactly makes Halsey Halsey, stylistically, sonically, which I think she's still kind of yet to do. So I don't know. While I think this record coming from her is a very personal record, and I like that it is a diverse LP stylistically and sonically, it could have gone further. Hatari, the Icelandic future pop and aggro tech band that shocked Eurovision, have come through with their debut album, and if you are into screamed vocals in a foreign language with politically charged lyrics over, I guess, aggressive techno beats, give it a try. Be my guest. I do think the group's sound is not that dynamic, though. The record really starts running out of ideas at one point, and I can't say I would necessarily go out of my way to listen to these instrumentals if they didn't have vocals. I suppose what I'm trying to say ultimately is that there are elements of Hatari's sound that I find to be just okay, while I like generally the look and the aesthetic and the vibe and the radical and wild attitude that the group brings forward. I think the music could be a bit, more versatile, more detailed, and tribute this particular brand of future pop a bit better. So at this point, pretty cool, lots of potential, and maybe looking forward to a new record at some point that might hit a little bit harder. This Russ record I could not get into. Not only is this one of the thinnest and most thankless sets of instrumentals on a Russ album so far, but he continues to squander his talents for rapping with weak songs, underwhelming verses. He had a pretty impressive feature list going into this thing, but people like Rick Ross were really phoning it the hell in. I feel like I know what I'm going to get exactly, like to a T, when I go into a Russ album at this point, because he's not really trying anything new lyrically. He's not really trying anything new instrumentally. And as a result, this record was just, above all else, boring. While it's amazing that Russ does what he does as pretty much a lone wolf, he, left up to his own devices, just plays it really, really, really safe. we waited all this time for this album with messy instrumentals and songs that feel barely finished, such a scant track list, and weak performances. Roux can do so much better. I just don't know how did we get here? It's killing me. The Suicideboys are back with a new project. It is a shorty with huge Memphis vibes. Lots of trap beats, big bass, tight flows. So some more melodic choruses here and there and a few weird stylistic variations, but nothing nearly as out there as that Travis Barker EP they did last year. I would say this is Suicideboys trying to get a little bit back to form, give the fans more tracks and more songs that they're sort of used to hearing from them, really kind of going back to their roots and all that, which is not entirely a bad thing. Just kind of hitting the reset button, doing what they're known best for, and for the most part, sounding pretty good in the process. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of K-pop in the world, I know well enough to know when I hear the best crop of Loona songs so far on this EP. The production hits hard, the instrumentals are pretty varied, you have more modern bangers, you have one track on here that feels almost like an 80s throwback, and it's a good set of tunes too, and great vocal performances. And it's not overproduced like many tracks on the new BTS record were. It's just high energy, good grooves, catchy choruses, good vocal arrangements. It's a quality Loona project, and anybody who is a little K-pop curious, give it a shot, because just generally, it is good pop music. Legendary post-rock and screamo outfit Envy are back with a new LP, their first, I think, in 5 years. It's been a little while, and it's pretty good. Nothing crazy new or groundbreaking for Envy, but they are one of the most consistent post-rock, or at least post-rock adjacent bands out there, really yet to put out a terrible record, and this is just yet another example of the quality writing and good performances that go into pretty much every single LP. Now, I will say the heavier tracks and more screamo-oriented tracks are the best ones here. Some of the more mellow cuts do tend to lull for me, but if Envy's unique blend of screamo and post-rock, or even if you're kind of curious to hear that sort of thing, because it's not something a lot of bands have done or have been as successful doing as Envy, just give it a try. Give it a shot. It's a quality rock record. I know emo and screamo are very popular these days, and Envy has been around for decades, and I feel like with a lot of current day emo fans, not enough of them are quite appreciating Envy's contributions to the genre, and what better place to start than a new record from the band that's actually pretty good. The latest LP from Destroyer really does break my heart in a way, despite having been a big fan of Dan Behar's music for years and years and years. These are some of Dan's weakest vocal passages, and on top of that, this is the most embarrassing, wonky, weirdly mixed, and awkward sets of instrumentals to ever make it onto any Destroyer album, period. Like, they don't really complement Dan's style at all. They're jumping all over the place stylistically, so there's no real cohesion to the record itself. I just personally don't see the appeal of this one at all. This really needed to not go out into the world. Not really into it, unfortunately. New record from this musical project known as Cindy Lee, which is spearheaded by multi-instrumentalist, singer-songwriter, formerly of Women, Patrick Flegel. I know Cindy Lee has come out with stuff in the past, though I haven't really gone too deep into it or covered it. I will say this is one of the boldest and most well put together Cindy Lee projects so far, though that is a tough thing to gauge, because Cindy Lee tends to be a very out there musical endeavor, as there is very little consistency, rhyme, or reason to the flow of this record. Sure, it's pretty noisy, it's pretty hypnagogic at points too, but it is difficult to make heads or tails of, because a lot of the tracks here are just that odd. It's a head scratcher, I'll say that. A new album from the Brockhampton adjacent singer-songwriter Ryan Beatty. While I have enjoyed Ryan's vocals on features here and there, between this and his last record, I'm just still in a place where I haven't quite yet heard vocal performances that convince me Ryan can carry an entire record on his own. While I have heard some stunning vocals from him and hooks from him, I'm just not hearing them on his own record personally, especially this new one, where the vocals are manipulated and processed in a variety of different ways across the track list, to the point where the album doesn't really have a singular character or direction or voice. A lot of the vocals are manipulated and changed around to the point where I feel like the singing is kind of kneecapped and ruined and not all that pleasurable to listen to. The last LP at least seemed kind of consistent and knew the sound it wanted to generate and what direction it wanted to go in, even if it was a little one-dimensional. This LP, by comparison, is just very schizophrenic, very all over the place, very indecisive, and that also shows up in the quality of the songwriting as well. So, I don't know, just not really feeling this one. A new massive album of lots of tracks from one of the biggest auto crooners out there right now, a Boogie with the Hoodie. And yeah, I can't say I'm into this one. Mostly because I think Boogie boils this style and boils this trend down to its most poppy commercial elements and tries to make them even slicker than they are typically. I personally don't really get it. It just sounds like an endless advertisement to me. It just sounds like an ad. It just sounds like I'm skipping through a bunch of YouTube pre-rolls. The musical equivalent to that, I suppose. A lot of bedroom pop enthusiasts freaking out about the new Zack Villere album. Was pretty curious about it myself after enjoying one of the teasers to it. But now that I hear the whole thing, why are the vocals so bad? Why is the singing this bad? Does the singing need to be this bad? Do the vocal harmonies need to sound this awkward? Does the singing need to be this clumsy and goofy? I don't get the appeal. I don't know. That's really all I have to say. I can't hate on Zack's lyrical content or even the quality of some of the instrumentals on this thing, but the vocals just seem way too amateurish with no real charm whatsoever. I can't really get much out of them personally. Best Coast is back, and it is more very low-grade indie rock and pop, just as it has always been. But hey, if you are that type of person who this has scratched some kind of itch for you, I guess the upside is that Best Coast has not really changed all that much radically over the years. So, you know, you kind of know what you're getting. The new Ozzy record is a somewhat interesting one. Metal legend in his 70s at this point. He has some fantastic solo LPs. His work with Black Sabbath is so essential to the metal canon. The man's influence in media across the board, not just music, is massive. But I don't really feel like this new LP from him is all that flattering. While the vocals do sound pretty good, and I don't know how much they may or may not have been touched up, but vocally Ozzy still sounds pretty consistent, you know, and look, this is a guy who vocally should have been sort of like waning in the 2000s, and even back then he was sounding pretty good. But production-wise, I feel like this album is a mash of a lot of old, rehashed tropes and some newer trends with some weak, crunchy, just overly heavy drums and guitar engineering. It just sounds really horrid. Like it's not very complimentary to Ozzy's vocal tone and to the eras of music that his voice was so relevant to. It just kind of feels like a blown up and cheapened and overly heavy and distorted version of that. I will say the Elton John duet is beautiful, and I do think the opening track rocks pretty hard, and there are some elements of the song with Post Malone that are pretty out there and fun, even if the vocal processing makes Ozzy's voice sound pretty hideous. I think there are some respectable elements to this LP, but it's not a very strong showing, mostly because the songs and the production are fairly weak. The new Real Estate LP sounds sleepy as ever. This band is still putting me to sleep. Some of the dreamiest and faintest songs, vocals, guitars, drums, everything in indie music. I still don't get the appeal, but hey, I guess you can say Real Estate are still sticking to their guns, their night-night lullaby, good time, go to bed guns. While still at this point, I would not call myself a Nudy fan. What I do admire about this new project is that the production, the recording, the flows on this one are a lot more raw, and the performances are more animated. Nudy does not sound quite so out of his gourd and high to the point where he's nearly comatose on this. He sounds just alive on this one. He sounds lively, and I'm liking that energy. I do think his flows are a bit messy, but he does have a unique twang to his voice that does make him stick out quite a bit. So, I don't know. I think this one's okay. It's a decent one. It's decent. It's decent. Zishin, have you given any of these albums a listen? Did you love them? Did you hate them? What would you rate them? You're the best. You're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe. Please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, music forever.